Hey everybody, my name is Stuart, and if you are new to this channel, please subscribe. I've been a speaker for the last 29 years, having spoken to well over 500,000 people around the world. I've been an executive coach, and my specialization is neuro-linguistic programming, organizational development, leadership, and teams. If you'd like to find out a little bit more about all that I do, about mindset and the power of leadership, please click on the subscribe button so that you'll get additional updates, and feel free to browse through my playlists. Now, it does sound a little bit odd to begin on this journey of exploring patterns of behavior because there's so many different patterns that exist. Some are excellent and some of them are just terrible to follow. What I want to cover is the psychology of mistake making. Now, obviously, you must have made a mistake before, right? If you're like me, you've probably found that making mistakes is a terrible thing and you wish you could stop making those mistakes. Am I right? Trouble is that whenever we make a mistake, we tend to learn a lot more from it. Bill Gates once said that success is a terrible teacher. One of the most important things I've discovered about mistakes is that we have tendencies. Number one, avoiding mistakes. When you avoid mistakes, you end up creating a problem for yourself, which is you don't get practice getting out of those mistakes. Like I say, any entrepreneur, any professional who wants to get over mistakes must incorporate the mistake into their system of development. Number two, they're going to blame other people for the mistake that they've done. For example, I used to be like this. I used to think that the circumstances were the problem. It was my teachers who didn't do a good job. It was my bosses who didn't do a good job. And as a result of that, I was protecting my own ego by encumbering myself with more problems. As a result of thinking that other people were to blame, I couldn't take any action to deal with the problems myself. And that delayed my development. The third thing that people do is they complain. Complaining is a very simple thing to do because when you complain, people tend to rally around you, they soothe you, they tell you it's okay, don't worry about it. And as a result, the soothing gets rid of the pain of the mistake. You're playing this game so that other people will come to you and tell you everything is okay. Well, you've got to shift your attention away from that kind of sympathy towards really doing something about the mistakes. Think about it this way. If you've got a splinter in your arm and somebody comes to you and tells you, oh, it's okay, and soothes you, gives you some painkillers and puts a plaster over that, do you think you're really going to be okay? Or should you really go clinical on that, remove that big splinter so that there will no longer be any restrictions in your movement? The next thing that people do is to deny. Now, denying is pretty much like the ostrich head in the sand. If you want to hide away, it's easy, but guess what happens? You don't get practice with a mistake, you're going to likely make that same mistake again, and if you don't sit down and do proper reflection surrounding the mistake and gather the right kinds of meanings behind it, you're going to go off on different trajectories and you're going to make the same mistake again. I've seen this many times with younger entrepreneurs, for example, who end up not facing up to the mistake, not learning how to deal with the mistake, and then trying to do something else. Take, for example, running. If you've always run, overextending one of your legs, it's very likely that you're going to end up with some kind of soreness or muscle injury as a result, or joint injury. One of the things is the cycle of habitual performance is likely to show up some of these mistakes. And if you don't have a coach who can observe you and tell you to realign your movements, it's going to get worse and worse with time. It's easier to see for training for a sport because sports tend to take place within a narrower window of time. However, business is not like that. Business takes place over weeks, months, and years. So if you were to observe a snapshot of your business, chances are you think it's your marketing that's at fault. Why? Because marketing is the simplest, easiest way to get results. You put up an ad, you generate a result. At the end of the day, that cycle is just going to be a few days or a few weeks apart. But running business is very different. If you deny that you're a terrible leader, if you deny that the way by which you're running your business is devoid of effective communication and you don't get down to the roots of the problem, then you won't be able to address the actual problem, let alone accept it in the first place. The last one is to make excuses. Most people make excuses. I'm no different. I've made excuses for half of my life and I didn't like it. Until I began to accept and take responsibility for it and constantly suppress all of the avoidance, blaming, complaining, and denying, those things began to enable me to see clearly without any encumbrance, without any kind of blockage. And that clarity enabled me to step forward in time so that I could look back at my old self and the mistakes that I made as a boon, as something that was beneficial for me. Now, I understand that all of these 5 things are easy to say but difficult to do, right? But the first thing you need to do is to be aware of what kinds of patterns of behavior you have. So, for example, if you've always gotten into trouble with hiring the wrong people, ask yourself, Why is that the case? Is it because your measures were not accurate enough? Or is it that you didn't really know what you were doing and you kept on hiring the wrong people? If that was the case, once you take responsibility for it and you dive into the root cause, chances are your problem will disappear. However, if you avoid it, deny, complain, blame, make excuses, you're going to get further and further away from that problem. And as a result, the cycle is more likely to manifest in a much bigger way down the line. Your losses will be more extreme, your mistakes will be more catastrophic, and the consequences more severe. I'd like you to think about it this way. As you continue that run again and again and again, hobbling or having a misalignment with your ankles or whatever kind of postural deficiencies, if you ignore the need for realignment, you're going to create a greater and greater problem over time. And by the time it really manifests as pain, you're going to have to go for surgery, some kind of corrective measure that is going to be far more painful to readjust and realign. Now, having said that, I don't like to make that mistake of telling people how not to make the mistakes. Why? Because let's just put it this way. You need to make a couple of really good mistakes in order to survive in the world. So if it means for you to go bankrupt, if it means for you to lose everything and start all over again, more power to you, because you're going to elevate yourself because you finally found the baseline of your suffering. Once you found the baseline of your suffering, avoidance, denial, blaming, complaints, excuses are all going to fly out the window. All you know is that you're confident that you'll never ever make this mistake again, and then it becomes painful enough for you to move forward. Does this mean that all life is based on mistakes that you made? Well, not really. There are some things where you could have improved. So one of my friends, Kenneth Yu, says that sometimes you only have morning pain and not moving pain. If you got morning pain, that kind of pain that you experience is just going to keep you in that boiling pot until you simmer and die. Conversely, you need moving pain so that you get beyond whatever your mental obstacles are, so that you can see differently, so that you can look beyond whatever kinds of outcomes that you've already accomplished, whatever kinds of consequences that have happened to you, whatever results that you have gotten. Utilizing that as feedback by reflecting deeply on what those mistakes really mean for you, and seek the input from various different people who might be able to see much further down the line. Most people are unable or unwilling to do this because it feels just so bad experiencing these mistakes. And sometimes, on the flip side, it's possible to go down the wrong route of self-blame due to those negative consequences. However, I'd like to ask you to balance those views out. Yes, it's not pleasant to experience these negative feelings. At the same time, can you learn something about it? Can you stop making those mistakes before those spiral out of control so that the patterns of behavior become worse and worse? I'll give you one example, and it's a personal example. A long time ago, I used to think that I was the bomb. And it was so easy to be arrogant and egotistical. In fact, one of the things that got me over a lot of stress, pressure, was drinking. I literally spent a couple of hours having 2-3 glasses of wine every single night. And we all know that when you're young, you're invincible. And that was the point of time where my drinking habit began to accelerate, and it became quite bad, to a point where every time I felt stressed, having a drink was the default mechanism. And I would be able to accumulate up to 4 bottles of red wine in a single night, not including starters. And because of this accumulation, I didn't look at how I was handling the stress. I wasn't meditating, I wasn't exercising, I wasn't working out. How do you think that worked out for me? So it doesn't mean that I stopped drinking. I reduced immensely the quantity of drinks that I actually had. I'm more energized, I'm more in control of my overall physical output, and I'm sharper in my thinking as well. Overall, I had to stop that by learning how to pull the rug from under my own feet and rediscover what it meant for me to stop making that mistake over and over again. And now I just associate drinking with having certain nights out with good friends, and that's it. I don't have the luxury of time to meet all of my friends every single night. So on occasion, I'll sit down, have a good drink with them, and I'll know where my limit is. Think about your mistakes. Where are your limits? How far can you go if you continue to do this? Can you visualize inside of your mind what would happen if you continue to make this mistake and don't have a platform to practice overcoming these mistakes? I've seen this happen all the time. In couple therapy, whenever I sit down with couples, they have never had the practice of having conflictual conversations. It's so uncomfortable, they shout at each other, but it's possible for us to bring in new rules of engagement in order for them to communicate better. As a result of that, things become better and different ways of thinking can be invoked in order for new conversations to be uncovered. In business conversations, I've seen entrepreneurs who are at the top of their game just topple all the way down simply because they refuse to let go of their ego. I've seen entrepreneurs who stubbornly stick with their business models and are unwilling to change or pivot, and they end up going bankrupt. I've seen people who have a way of thinking, their mindset behind hiring people is patently incorrect because they're just hiring based on the people that they like to have in their organization, forgetting that there's something called bias and you need to assess for competency. At the end of the day, mistakes made in youth are going to help you to become wiser over the years. But at the same time, you will always need the means to do your reflection. So ask yourself, have I reflected on my mistakes? Do I even know what my mistakes are? And am I making the ABCDEs to escape? By learning to accept our mistakes, it will open up new avenues for us to move forward ahead, to move forward and to achieve the goals that we actually truly want, and also to elevate ourselves so that when we look back at our former selves, we'll discover that we've actually made a lot of progress. So, if you found that this was helpful, please click the like and subscribe button. Allow us to share this to more people on YouTube. If you found that you had questions regarding this topic, feel free to drop it down in comments below. Whatever the case, I do hope that this information and this perspective is going to help to elevate you to a level beyond suffering and challenge so that you can take actions for abundance.